right, today I am working on presenting the lesson for Come Follow Me for the Gospel Doctrine class, and the chapters that we have been studying all week has been Mosiah chapters 7 through 10. This is the story when Mosiah really jumps around a lot. In the timeline and also geographically. So he's all over the place, and sometimes it's hard to remember where exactly are we in the timeline of things. If you find that you have really struggled to figure out who's where, what's happening when, shoot me a message and I'll send you a map. That's been very helpful to me. So if you want a copy of that map, let me know and I can send it to you digitally. But today we're talking about how a group of men have moved from the main body of the Nephites down to reclaim their former lands, which the Lord had asked them to leave long time ago, and they were obedient, and they did. But these guys were like, we would like to go back home. The Lord asked them 3 different times to not do it, but he honors your choices, and so that's a good thing. So what we're going to be looking at is a little bit of their stories and how they intertwine. In chapter 7, we have King Mosiah. They'd kind of been... There's a group of people that had left and in search of the old stomping grounds, and they kind of were picking on King Mosiah, the new King Mosiah, number 2, to find out what happened to him. And so he said, all right, I'll send some guys and we'll go look. We'll have them go look. And so he picked Ammon, which is not the same Ammon as the guy who cut off all the arms. That's a different Ammon. So Ammon was a very common name for those people in that time, and so it's a totally different Ammon, so don't get your hopes up. But so he picked Ammon to go down to look for them. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that made me pause a little bit, I try to liken scriptures to me as I go and as I study. And in chapter 7, verse 2, it reads, "And it came to pass that King Mosiah granted that 16 of their strong men might go up to the land of Limhi, Nephi, to inquire concerning their brethren." So I thought about those 16 strong men, and I thought, if I was going somewhere like that, who would I want to take with me for that kind of a situation? It's not really an adventure, I wouldn't say, but what kind of people would I want to have with me? Who do I know in my world that I feel like I would definitely want them along on the trip? And so I made a list of 8 men and 8 women of people that are in my day-to-day life. So it wouldn't be like, I would take President Nelson, and I would take, I don't really know him. He's not in my phone. I don't text him. So it needs to be somebody that I knew. And so I went through and made a list of people that I felt would be great to take along with me. And it really made me understand why those people matter to me. More than just being awesome people, they strike a chord in my soul that is a little bit deeper than normal. So if you feel like that would be a good exercise to do, I'd encourage you to try that. Anyway, so he has 16 strong men that he wants to take with to go down and to look for these people. Who they do find is a king whose name is Limhi. Limhi is the great-great-grandson of Zeniff. Zeniff is the guy who started the whole community down there, and it kind of went south and sour on him. But Limhi kind of, when he found out who Ammon really was, he responded in such a way that kind of reminds me of the scriptures that's, not the scriptures, but the brethren have said that sometimes when the Lord answers your prayers, it's usually through another person's actions that he uses them to help answer your prayers. And Limhi felt like Ammon was that guy for him. Limhi and his people had been praying for a long time for help to get out of the bondage that they were in with the Lamanites. And here shows up Ammon and 16 of the strong men, spiritually strong men, maybe they were physically strong men, but 16 really wonderful people, and these people are there to kind of rescue them and help them to figure out how to get out of this situation. So sometimes I think that we are a lot like that group of Nephites down there, where we're suffering because of our sins, and we're wondering how will we ever find peace again. But then sometimes we are a lot like Ammon, who, feeling prompted, he reaches out to help others. Sometimes we are assigned to do that, and sometimes it's just a spiritual experience that we feel that we should reach out and connect with somebody. And sometimes you find out that those efforts were inspired to renew, those people's faith, kind of like Limhi felt like Ammon really renewed his faith in God, that God answers and hears our prayers. I want to jump up in chapter 7, verse 21, where it talks about how let's see. It is Limhi. He's gathered his people together a lot like King Mosiah did, gathering his people together at the temple to hear the messages that were important. And so Limhi has done the same thing. And he kind of talks to him about his great-grandfather and kind of how they're in this predicament to start with. And he tells all the people, and ye all are witnesses this day that Zeniff, who was made king over this people, he being overzealous to inherit the land of his fathers, therefore being deceived by the cunning and craftiness of King Laman, and having entered into a treaty with King Zeniff, and having yielded up into his hands the possessions of part of the land, or even the city of Nephi-Lehi, and the city of Shilom, and the land round about. So he's kind of rehearsing to them things that they know very well, that they've talked about for decades, I think. But what I thought about with that is that, sometimes when we kind of latch on to something that we want to do, we become overzealous ourselves. And it clouds our judgment. And sometimes when we do that, we just choose not to listen to the spiritual promptings. Or like in 1 Nephi chapter 17, verse 45, it says that you become past feeling, which is pretty dangerous water to be treading in. But I feel like sometimes we become overzealous in things, even today, in today's world. We do the same sort of thing when we sign financial contracts that we cannot afford to be making. Sometimes we become overzealous when we are busy obtaining material possessions at all costs, or because, whatever reason, fill in the blank why you feel like you must have those things. Some people are overzealous with political favors. We see that a lot in our political arena. Some folks choose career advancements over family and home environments, and all of those things seem to never really pan out in the end. In verse 25, it talks about Limhi says, if this people would not have fallen into transgression, the Lord wouldn't have, this great evil would have never been in our history. But behold, he says that they would not hearken unto his words, and things got really out of hand really fast. Sometimes, sin of any kind leads one into bondage. Some sins are more rapidly than others. Some are we think, pretty harmless sins, like white lies. Sometimes you use this phrase to rob Peter to pay Paul. That's one of those bondage moments that we're putting ourselves into. The phrase just this once, or no one will know, or it's not that big of a deal, all of those things that we say nowadays about our choices are really sending you into spiritual bondage, which you want to try to avoid that. It's interesting that Limhi recounts Abinadi's message that he offered to Zeniff's son Noah, and how they all reacted to that message. That is the exact same message that King Benjamin said to his, presented to his people, who loved all of that information and all of that spiritual knowledge. They found it to be a treasure. So I thought that was interesting that the exact same message was presented to two groups of Nephites, and one wholeheartedly embraced it and made covenants to that end, and the other persecuted and stoned the prophets, killed Abinadi, tried to track down Alma and wipe him out. It's the same message. Let's see. In chapter 7, verse 29, there was a scripture that I thought was interesting. It says, "For behold, the Lord hath said, I will not succor my people in the day of their transgression, but I will hedge up their ways, that they prosper not, and their doings shall be as a stumbling block before them." And I kind of want to cross-reference that with Doctrine and Covenants 101, verse 7. And this is when the people are being driven from their homes from Jackson County, and then they're moving over to Clay County, Missouri, and things are really the saints are really being persecuted. And in verse 7 of section 101, it says, "They were slow unto the voice of the Lord their God. Therefore the Lord their God is slow to hearken unto their prayers, to answer them in the day of their trouble." Basically, what that says to me is that the Lord never changes. He is so happy to answer our prayers and to help us out when we are trying hard to do our best. But when we choose to make choices that are not okay, He lets you make those choices, and He also lets you experience the consequences of those choices. One of the things that they did with that conference with Limhi, when he brought all of his people together, he turned the floor over to Ammon, because he wanted Ammon to explain how life was going back at Zarahemla, and to share a little bit about King Benjamin and the things that King Benjamin had just recently taught them in their community conference. And so in verse 3 it says, and this is what Ammon was doing for Limhi's people, "And he also rehearsed unto them the last words which King Benjamin had taught them, and explained them to the people of King Limhi, so that they might understand all the words which he spake." And I thought to myself, we do that today. When we have Relief Society classes and Elders Quorum classes, youth classes, where we take conference addresses from General Conference that's just occurred, and we all read and study them together and review them again to strengthen us and help us. That's kind of what Ammon was teaching the people, how to do that. And I thought that was good. One of the things that I noticed, Limhi talked about the men who were trying to go out to try and find Zarahemla. They had sent people up northward try and figure out how to get back to Zarahemla to escape the bondage of the Lamanites. If they managed to get free, they got to know where they're headed. And so they had sent some people northward looking for Zarahemla. They got lost, and they discovered the land of we know them as the Jaredites, and the record, the 24 plates that they couldn't read. And they brought a lot of things back with them. They brought back the records. They brought back swords and armor and all kinds of things that they found in this devastated land that was just bones and relics and no people. But it was a huge civilization. So they had brought that back. But you wonder, do you think that those guys felt like they were failures? Their mission was to go find Zarahemla, and they just found this land full of old bones and old pottery and these records. They felt like, well, shoot, we didn't do what we were supposed to do. Our mission was to go find Zarahemla, and we kind of failed. But I think that maybe when I think about it, I believe that, isn't it possible that the Lord had a very different assignment for those men? That he had a different assignment in mind? I've experienced this myself. I think that I'm thinking this is what I should be doing, and this is how I should be pursuing this situation in my life, and the Lord's like, I think we're going to go a different way. And sometimes it's hard to roll with it. I get overzealous, and I want to do it my way. But when I'm humble and let the Lord direct my path, I learn so much more than if I am stubborn and hold on to what I want to do. It talks about in chapter 8, Mosiah chapter 8, he talks about, I think it's in verse 12. He talks about 12 through 15, I guess. 12 through 18. He talks about seers and prophets and revelators. They're three different things. And a lot of times I think that when I've thought about it for a long time, I used to think, well, the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency, they are prophets, seers, and revelators. And it's this phrase that we say. And I'm just like, three different ways to say the same thing, right? And it never really occurred to me to stop and pick apart what is the difference between a prophet and a seer and a revelator. And so in my studies this year, as I was trying to grasp a little bit better definitions of those three things, I came across a quote from John A. Woodstow, who's way back in I think the 60s. He said, and it really made sense to me, and so I want to share what I learned with you. He said, a seer is one who sees, one who walks in the Lord's light with open eyes. A prophet is a teacher of known truth. A seer is a perceiver of hidden truth. And a revelator is one who bears new truth. So let me repeat those three distinctions. That a seer is one who perceives hidden truth. A prophet is a teacher of known truth. And a revelator is one who bears new truth. And as we go to, you sit in general conference, and these men teach us so many interesting things and so many good things. It will be interesting for me to review general conference again and pay attention to what hat they're wearing during this talk. Is it a hat that is they're teaching me something that's a known truth? Or maybe they're bringing to light a new truth that that we've never had before, or maybe they're just kind of opening up my eyes to a hidden truth that I didn't recognize before. So I thought that was interesting. In chapter 9, it talks. Let's go to verse 3. it's talking about this is Zeniff's record, and this is Limhi's great grandfather, and he talks a little bit about the situation that they, kind of a post view of what happened. And he said, "And yet I, being overzealous to inherit the land of our fathers, collected as many as were desirous to go up and possess the land, and started again on our journey into the wilderness to go up to the land. But we were smitten with famine and sore afflictions, for we were slow to remember the Lord our God." That was one of those. That was, I think, the third time that the Lord kind of tried to persuade him not to go. But I like that phrase that talks about that we were slow to remember the Lord our God. One thing that's helped me is every day I try to journal. It's not very lengthy, but I try to journal and remember the hand of God that I saw that day, whether it's in my life, someone else's life, experiences that I've read other people, just moments where I have been able to see God's hand in my life, in my family's life, in people that I know, and just that daily practice. And I'm daily looking and remembering and reflecting at the end of my day, looking for that to write down God's hand in my life or whatever. And that one practice has really helped me to not be slow to remember, but being quick to remember the things that God does for all of us each day. So if you want to try that out, maybe that might be a good thing to do for the month of May. Let's see, what else do we want to do? I want to jump to Doctrine and Covenants, section 38, verse 30. Let me pop ahead here. And let me read Doctrine and Covenants 38:30. And he says, "I tell you these things because of your prayers. Wherefore, treasure up wisdom in your bosoms, lest the wickedness of men reveal these things unto you by their wickedness, in a manner which shall speak in your ears with a voice louder than that which shall shake the earth. But if you are prepared, ye shall not fear." And so I think that Zeniff recognized that he had been had by King Laman. And he was really learning that prayer is going to be the only thing that's going to rescue them at this point. How to get them out. Zeniff had no idea how to help him and his community of Nephites be safe and to be okay. Sometimes I think that Zeniff really wanted very much to be a good leader, like King Benjamin was a good leader. Zeniff had a lot of those same qualities, and he really wanted to do a good job being a good leader and a good ruler for his people. So here is Zeniff, and he is right in the middle of all of the land of the Lamanites, are all around them, surrounding them. And here's this little tiny pocket of Nephites. And Zeniff still is pretty overzealous, I think. They go to battle with him, they win, and then they just go back to living in that same place and farming and trying to live a peaceful existence. It never changes. The Lamanites are always going to be seeking their destruction. Sometimes long stretches of peace lend themselves to lull and pacify a people into a false sense of stability or a false sense of security, that all is well in Zion kind of mentality. Zeniff was still astute enough, though, to maintain a watch over all those years. And I thought to myself, how does that apply to me today? How do I put a watch guard up for, I'm living in the middle of a lot of there's righteous pockets here and there, but there's a lot of unrighteousness in the world around us. How do I continually keep a careful watch for that. And so I think that sometimes that's important to kind of sit and think, how am I making sure my family and I are safe? One of the things I thought was interesting that I had never thought about before was in chapter 10. It talks about the Lamanites, and this is in verse 8. This is the Lamanites that came attacking this little tiny pocket of Nephites, the Zeniff, people of Zeniff. And it came to pass that they came up upon the land, upon the north of the land of Shilom, with their numerous hosts, men armed with bows and with arrows and with swords and with scimitars and with stones and with slings. And they had their heads shaved, that they were naked, and they were girded with a leathern girdle about their loins. And sometimes I thought to myself, these Lamanites are not real smart, because why do they feel so confident to just have this minimal protective gear? Then it occurred to me that the Lamanites' goal was not to kill the Nephites. That was not their goal. Their goal was to break their will. Their goal was to inspire fear and terror. They didn't want to kill them. They wanted to enslave them. They wanted to make them work for them so that the Lamanites wouldn't have to work. So it doesn't really do you any good to kill the people who are farming so that you can steal their stuff, and that are producing, herds and things. Where are you going to get meat? If they all are dead, then you're going to have to do it. So they just really were trying to scare them into, cowering and just letting them, staying put. So I thought that was something interesting that I had not thought about before. King Laman was just so, in chapter 18, not chapter 18, verse 18 of chapter 10, it talks about, let me read it to you. For this very cause has King Laman by his cunning and lying craftiness and his fair promises deceived me, that I have brought this my people up into the land, that they may destroy them. Yea, and we have suffered these many years in the land. And I thought to myself, King Laman was totally committed to his wickedness. He invested for over 40 years in the people of Zeniff, in very carefully and slowly strangling them and cutting them off and enslaving them. It took him 40 years to get them right where he wanted them to be. So he was very, very patient in his wickedness. And his goal from day one to the very end was one thing, and that was to totally destroy that particular branch of the Nephites. And that was his goal. And he was willing to invest 40 years of his life in that pursuit of that goal. The Lamanites had taught their children for just ever about all of and it talks about it in chapter 10, verses 12 through, 17. It talks about all the things that the Lamanites felt were reasons why the Nephites were such bad people and why they deserved this kind of treatment. Sometimes I think in our lives we kind of feel like we're getting tossed around a lot. There's happy days, and then there's rough days, and there's great days when we feel like we're doing everything right and everything is going okay, and then there's days when it's just you feel like you're drowning in all of this stuff that's just kind of swallowing you whole. And I came across an insight that I thought I would share with you that I thought was interesting, and then I'll close it out for today. Immigrants in our nation. Our great grandparents were immigrants coming from all of these different places on the globe to the Americas to start over, so for them, immigration was being on these massive steamships for weeks and weeks on end, and their goal was to, arrive in this new land. And I feel like for them, life was almost a constant and endless immigration. Every experience that they had, it was just fresh new territory, and everything was new, and everything was a puzzling thing, and they really had to work hard overcoming a lot of things. Um, and perhaps this helps, these are the notes that I wrote, perhaps this helps us to understand that the world of experience is as one vast ocean that we never stop crossing, even at death. We must learn to accept that no matter what the shore is before us, the swell and toss of the sea never ends. When brought to the crest of a swell, we can see as far as eternity, and our soul has a refreshed perspective. But when in the belly of those waves, we are, each of us, for the moment, lost. Over our life here on earth has us bobbing on a raft of flesh, in and out of view of eternity. And the work, our work, of our inner pilgrim is to keep eternity in our heart and mind's eyes. So when we are dropped in the belly of our days, imagine that each day is a wave. Your task each day is to feel what kind of a wave today is. If today is cresting, look about you and take in all that you see of life. If today is a belly of a day, acknowledge before God the hardships you are facing. Just remember that another crest is coming. Bring into your mind the last rising and remember what that enabled you to see. Sometimes I hope that as we study the Book of Mormon this year, we will be able to see these crests and dips in the ocean of experiences that this Nephite nation went through, and even the Lamanites themselves, and how that how similar that is to us in our days. I bear my testimony that I love the Book of Mormon. I learn so much every day when I study it, and I hope that you and your family have enjoyed studying this week too. Take some time to write in the comments and share things that you have learned so that all of us can share that with you as well. Take care, and I hope you have a great week.